For those of you who don't know, I love the Civilization franchise. I personally have sunk over 300 hours into the PVE of Civ 6 and roughly the same amount online in Civ 5. It's always been a game franchise that makes me lose hours of my life while having a ton of fun. So when I saw that Civ 7 was being released, I said to myself that this was one of 4 games that I'm willing to pre-order in the modern day. My reasoning is that they've never let me down in the past when it comes to my general opinion on each game, and I have loved every experience I've had in the previous titles. Before we dive deep into the Honest Thoughts episode, I wanted to just say real quick that this game is good, but it does fall victim to the exact same issues that previous Civ titles have fallen victim to, and what many modern games as well fall into, which is the fact that, they just aren't fully completed products, or at least don't feel like they are. They release a generally speaking okay base game, and the DLC comes in a year or two later and makes the title amazing. For example, with the 5th installment, you all know if you've played the base game how awful this game actually is, but the DLCs make this one of the best in the entire franchise. The 6th game is kind of similar. While I would argue that the actual base game of Civ 6 is relatively good, Gathering Storms as a DLC made this game superb. I've enjoyed my first 24 hours whilst playing Civilization 7, but I don't know whether or not that is because I fundamentally think the game is good, or because it's the same type of experience that I'm used to enjoying. Keep this in mind while I'm discussing this game, whether it's negative or positive, or the middle ground. I do believe this game is good, and it is enjoyable, but I can't put my finger on exactly why. Now though, let's talk about Civilization 7. I'll be starting off by discussing what I really liked about this newest installment, and the first place is the army and naval commanders and how they work. In Civ 6 you would get great people, and they would be able to give you some form of bonuses, whether that's, turning into a specific troop set or giving you promotions and whatnot, or just creating a whole new vessel. In Civ 7, army commanders and naval units actually feel like genuine navies and actual armies, whereas no previous game has ever allowed you to feel like you're truly going to war with an army. And also, having the commanders allows there to be so much less visual clutter, which is far nicer to look at. Instead of getting level ups upon every single unit, you can end up using a commander who can get those level ups instead, and it applies towards different effects, whether that's damage being dealt, the capacity of people that he can have within his garrison, and much more. They've also made changes to how cities function within Civ 7. Instead of you having cities off the get-go, they start off as towns besides your capital, and then you can upgrade them into cities later on. I think this is great for many reasons. One is because it's more accurate to the idea that, not all cities are made with the intentionality of becoming cities. Very few have ever been built on the face of the planet in comparison to every single city that exists. But also it allows you to have speciality towns, which is far more like real life, or at least some areas, unless you live in the UK and then London is basically the hub for everything, because, it is. And because of this, you end up being able to be far more tactical about how you use your towns and cities, how many you have of each, because when you end up in emergency events, you can have some issues where, for example, every single city that typically will have far higher happiness than most towns that you have, on average anyway from my experience, instead of upgrading every single town to a city, because you're going to have a negative effect be towards, let's say, 50% in your happiness, it means that you're able to get by far easier and have a load more towns and just a few cities. The next area of this game that I think is tremendous in what they've chosen to go down the route of is diplomacy. I love the way that influence works and diplomacy works within this game. It actually allows you to feel like an actual governmental power instead of just a war machine or whichever country is the most technologically advanced. That being said, I would say that I don't like the inability to condemn other countries from settling right next to you like you could within Civ 6. It's very annoying, because at many moments of this game, you could blatantly have control over a massive amount of land you just haven't settled in a certain area, and then they just wander their settler through your city. You haven't even got open borders with them, they've just wandered it through somehow, and then they just shove their settler down, and it's incredibly annoying. With this system, it allows you to actually feel like you're being diplomatic instead of just existing like you would within previous games. And the last area that I'm going to say that I really enjoy is the new way that city-states function. With city-states, they start off as villages and eventually can become a part of your empire if you choose to use your influence to do so, and I really like this feature as it can allow you to pad out your entire civilization if you want to, but it also means that you can just choose to have them as as general buffer zones for your empire, which I generally speaking really enjoy. You can use these city-states to be really tactical, whether it's talking about culture, science, or military function, but also you can use them to be effective proxies to your empire's existence, which, again, is great. Now though, let's talk about what I would refer to as the it's okay, it's fine section of the video. The first of three things that I'm going to be putting into the fine category is the way that combat works within this game. It's okay, it's nothing special, but it definitely feels like the troops feel a little bit more powerful than they were in previous titles. The main thing that I find mildly annoying though, and my only criticism of the combat, is the amount of times that I've been shown a full red bar that I would completely take out a unit to then be, fighting them the next turn because they had 1 HP is incredibly annoying. One of the biggest things that people will be talking about with Civilization 7 in particular is the way that ages work and how civilizations evolve. I think this is a okay feature. I'm not necessarily against it or massively in love with it. The whole premise of it is that you can choose a particular leader right off the bat, choose different attribute points if you want to, and then you can choose which type of empire you want to be during the Antiquities Age, and then you can develop them as you go into things like the Explorer Age and the Technological Age, or the Information Age. I've forgotten the exact one. One thing that I did find really annoying on one of my saves is that I was one turn away from taking an enemy's capital, and, their empire would be a few more steps away from crumbling. And, because the era ended, it all reverted back. Their city was, full back at health, and the war was over. And for me, this was really annoying, because when I say I was one turn away, I mean literally the city had like 2 HP, and the next turn would have allowed me to use 1 unit and take the city. Unlike many, however, I don't mind this feature generally speaking. I want to be in a position where I feel like I want to go back and play Civ 6, and not feel like 7 is going to mentally stop me from going back and enjoying a game that I have loved for ages now, which is what 6 did to me when it comes to Civ 5. So like I said, I am happy to see this change come into place, as it actually allows this game to feel like it's tackling it in a different way than previous entries. Lastly, the eras and the way that they impact the game is just fine. It's not awful, as some may say. It's not this legendary change either. I think it works, but overall it just makes the game feel a little bit more unique and allows more strategic elements, and adds a lot more replayability than other games in the entire franchise. That ends off the just fine section of the video, and I wanted to get into what I don't like. But before I do, I just want to restate again that I do enjoy this game. I have enjoyed my time with it, and I'm still playing it and still enjoying it. I'm yet to play another game of Civ 6 just yet, but I will definitely be going back to it. However, I do have some issues with this game. First isn't going to sound out of place for anyone who's watched literally any video talking about Civ 7, and that is the UI. This game's UI is incredibly bland, and quite honestly, awful. Not only is it visually boring to look at, but it also just feels very just bland as a system in comparison to Civ 6, where you actually have different building types. Everything just meshes together when you're looking at it, and it makes it a struggle to know what really is important, what's worth bothering about, or really what the difference is between different buildings. I personally do find this game to be looking a little bit too dark and moody for my own liking. What I mean by this is that the game as a whole, from the UI to the hidden tiles, are so dark in comparison to every other entry in the world of Civ that it just makes it just not an enjoyable thing to look at. I know this sounds like a really stupid thing to be talking about and complaining about, but to me, a vibe of a game really does help me connect to the world itself and the game that I'm playing, and, moody games work within the likes of Dark Souls, or Metal Gear games, or Dishonored, but here it just doesn't work for me. My next issue with this game is going to be talking about the change from builders to population tiles and how they function. While I don't mind this on a surface level, I just prefer the builders system. The reason for this is that I don't like having to micromanage cities and towns, especially when you get into late games, and yes, I understand that you can change a town's priority and whatnot, and that does help, but still, the amount of micromanaging you have to do is insane. When you end up in the late game especially, and you haven't set towns priorities yet, and you have like 20 plus cities, it is so annoying that every single turn you're hit with like 5 different towns and how you have to choose them for different things, and you can't even grow the town anymore. So then you have to go, okay, just remind myself that I need to change the town's population focus. It's an annoying feature that I kind of wish, once you got to that point, the city just can't grow, or if it does, it will literally just go, we're going to automate this feature for you. Outside of this, I also just don't feel the same way that I did in previous games for the way that tiles improve. While they technically are the same in terms of general functionality, the feeling of managing your city and its resources feel far less within your control, or just feeling as if you don't have too much impact on it. Having builders just makes you feel like you are in more control than you necessarily are. I did say that I really like the way that towns and cities work, which I do. I just don't like what happens in the next eras when you've upgraded certain towns into cities. Over on my second channel, I did make a ramble about Civ 7, and someone commented about how, well, it's accurate because, for example, Rome wasn't a city during the Dark Ages. By the way, I found zero evidence of this. In the Dark Ages, the population did decline, but it was never formally changed to a town after the fact. It was never changed. The Pope specifically made it keep its city status or something along those lines. So yeah, that never actually happened. And while I am open to saying that, you know, this probably has happened to some cities in the past, being downgraded to towns, but when you pay 1,000 gold in Civ 7 to upgrade your city, it really annoys me that I'll have to pay this yet again, or, you know, half of this in the next era, just because the game chooses to. It's just choosing to make a gameplay mechanic that's just annoying above anything else. Next up isn't a feature in itself, but the lack thereof, which is the loyalty system within Gathering Storms and Governors. For me, this was one of the best solutions to the problem that I've had with many Civ games, and a lot of people have faced, which is the way that, you know, loyalty functions and happiness. The fact that it wasn't put into this game in any proper way is a shame to see. With loyalty not being implemented in the same way within this game, or just something similar, is really disappointing to see. Instead of dealing with any form of loyalty issues, you can literally settle miles away from your own capital, and for the most part, it will be fine. You'll have zero issues. While yes, cities can rebel, others can join your empire, or, you know, vice versa. But in most cases, they won't leave your entire empire because it doesn't matter. With the system of loyalties and governors, it meant that you had to be far more specific with the growth of your empire and how you went about taking over cities. Now though, it basically means nothing, and you don't really have to worry. This leads me to my bigger issue that saddens me about this game, and that is the return of happiness. In the 5th game in this franchise, I always had an issue with how happiness worked, and felt like it was a system that didn't really make sense for the game itself. While yes, an empire or country requires citizens to be happy to avoid rebellion, I don't think that this game takes into account that if a country declares war, it's not always going to be viewed as a negative thing within the eyes of the citizens. Whether that's some expansionist nation in the past, or more recent wars fighting for freedom or opposing totalitarianism, fascism, and communism, all these regimes had to be toppled, and the people weren't necessarily unhappy about going to war for these things, nor were countries unhappy about the idea of going to war. Sometimes it is the case that things like propaganda does work, and other methods that actually make people feel justified in their approach in going to war. And also, if another empire declares war on you, your happiness gets affected, which I understand for a very basic level, but when you start winning the war, or even, you know, the war hasn't necessarily fully started coming into the empire, why on earth does it have such a drastic effect? At times, I went from 300 happiness to 30 in most towns very quickly. And this is all because another nation declared war on me. It wasn't like I was declaring war for oil, okay? It wasn't that. It was literally just they declared war on me because I didn't give them a trade route. It doesn't make any logical sense for this core gameplay mechanic, in my opinion, to exist, and I would rather have the loyalty system function within cities themselves, and they can have happiness. Have happiness as a core fundamental concept within the cities, but have loyalty as the primary functionality, because there is many times where things can just happen and your happiness goes down, and there's no explanation for why. This all brings me to my biggest complaint above them all, and that is something that I mentioned at the beginning of this video, and it is the civilization problem. One complaint that I've heard many people talk about is how this product feels unfinished, and that, you know, we know that DLCs are coming down the pipeline and that they will make the game great, but it just feels awful when you pay out, you know, 60, 70, and in some cases people have paid £120 for the Founders Edition of this game. Those sorts of things, and the game doesn't feel truly like it's finished. That is borderline robbery at its finest. While I do agree that this is an issue with modern day gaming, I do want to say that this is specifically an issue with Civilization. This franchise has always been like it. Each game release never feels like a finished product, and it's not until a DLC that comes a year or two later does it start to feel like a proper finished title. I don't know why this is the approach that they take, and do think in this instance it needs to be spoken about heavily. The fact that this game has in theory been 8 years in development, I don't actually know the development window, but it has been 8 years since the previous title. And this doesn't really feel too much different from Civ 5 or Civ 6 with DLCs, and if anything, it feels like they just stripped away things and added very minor changes. This is the sort of thing that you would expect from a Call of Duty or an Assassin's Creed with an annual release cycle. In this case, it's within one of the biggest titles in the entire genre that it exists in, and it's nothing more than very slight changes from a previous release that came out almost a decade ago. We need to start holding this franchise to a way higher standard. While I know it is ironic for me to be saying this given the fact that I pre-ordered this game, I do hope that based on the information that I did provide earlier, with the likes of genuinely loving Civ 6 and Civ 5 previously and loving their experiences, that it can at least, obfuscate some of that issue, okay? I get that I shouldn't have pre-ordered, but there is some games that I'm open to. Most games I'm not. My games for pre-order listing is Elder Scrolls 6, The Witcher 4, and then GTA 6. Those are my last 3 remaining games. Past that, it was Civ 7. So that is my pre-order list of games, and I'm hoping that it doesn't end up anything like this game again. But I enjoy playing this game. It's such a weird feeling to have. You have frustrations about something that you love, but there's things that you don't like, and you don't know where you sit truly on this issue. The devs have already come out saying that they're going to be working on solving a lot of the problems that people have spoken about, which is great to see. They talked about the UI being a big focus, so I do hope that they actually take that to heart, make something that's not all minimalistic all the time. I hate the look of this game when it comes to its UI. The tech tree, it looks so boring, it looks so dull. Just make it look somewhat nice, okay? That's all I'm asking for. And I will definitely be more interested in the modding community for this game than I was in previous titles. While I have enjoyed playing this game, I will continue to play this and Civ 6, and I hope to see more improvements being made, and hopefully not all of them be locked behind paywalls, and eventually dirt cheap DLCs a few years later. And with that all being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is my basic outro, and this is the first video in a while that's far shorter than most, and a lot more, in and out of rambling and following my script. Over the next few months, you're going to see a few more videos that are a little bit more rambly than necessarily fully scripted. I'm doing this for 2 reasons. One is that I would like to upload more because I have more things that I wish to talk about. However, there's such a big friction and such a idea in my head of how a video needs to be made that it holds me back from making these videos and talking about the things that I want to talk about, whether it's Assassin's Creed Shadows and some thoughts about that game, or, how I recently tried replaying Origins, and I honestly regret attempting to. And I want to talk about these things. I just don't want to do fully fledged, full detailed scripts. I just want to talk and explain some thoughts and get some thoughts back. So if that does interest you, please do subscribe to the channel. And another idea that I do have, let me know if you're interested in it. Let me know in the comments below, whoever is left. I want to possibly start a civilization channel. And I don't know how I'd go about it. I would like to do something that follows more stories, or, just follows an empire from beginning to end and just discussing it and having it kind of like a playthrough, but literally all one big video. Anyway, with that all being said, please make sure to go check out the Patreon if you wish to support the channel directly, and the Discord will also be linked down below for those interested who want to join our game club. Make sure to do so, it will be linked down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.